So now that we have talked about the negative side of things, how to stop the brain drain from other people, now really it's about talking about the strategies now to convert that stuck energy and into then action in order to feel light, to get lit up, to increase that electrical activity within our brain. So the first one, which we already talked about in the very beginning, is movement and think different. Okay, so because this is I think it's worth mentioning that we as a culture, we didn't even understand that exercise was good for us until the 70s. And so what we knew to be good for us then is maybe advanced a little bit rather than the same old strategy. So for movement, I was stuck in a very vicious cycle of that neuro emotional fog, this perceptual cycle of like, okay, I'm a marathon runner, I can run, I can dissipate that energy, but then I had these negative thought patterns that hadn't gotten broken, but I was moving the same exact way, which would then increase my energy, which then would then create brain drain, which then would then have a negative effect on my health because of the stuck energy phenomenon. So move and think of it as a couple different areas. So we've talked about the kind of identifying where is a stuck energy within the body, within the brain, within the mind, within different relationships. And then think about now taking movement into the equation. So for example, if you have a human that is a person that you have now this negative feedback loop of brain drain, then now to ask questions, give praise, tell stories. So how to implement movement into that equation to maximize the benefit? It's simple. Go for a walk with that human being. And especially if you notice a vicious cycle of perpetual amplification of this fight or flight response going, get movement into that equation. A simple walk, and then see what happens. By simply moving, we'll start to dissipate that stress response and convert that energy into an action step. So we talked about exercise as far as cardiovascular exercise with movement. Running long distance is a great one for this, because especially if you can run long distance with other people that you can then work through difficult things with, it is highly beneficial, because when you satisfy the stress response, you can then kick in the prefrontal cortex. And as our friend / expert of the world, Dr. Yuri Gitchroff said, is that the parasympathetic nervous system is faster than the fight or flight response. So just as quickly as you're in a fight or flight response, you can then transition into converting that energy into a strength. Okay, that's how quickly it goes. This isn't it takes time thing. It does take time to become automatic, but the process of converting the stress to strength automatically happens. So think of friction. Motion is lotion. Okay, motion is lotion. So if you've already been marking down, this is where my stuck energy is, this is where my stress pattern is, how do you incorporate movement into that part of your body? If it's in a relationship, how do you increase movement with interactions within the relationship? If it's in your body, how do you incorporate movement via stretching or cardiovascular exercise or strength training into that part of the body? And more importantly, how do you move differently? Think of the definition of sanity is doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result or expecting a different result. Move differently to then retrain your brain differently in order to convert stress into strength and get lit up a little bit. And then connect. And this one we broke down into 3 parts. Connect with God, and you can do that with the scripture. I read the Bible every day, read a proverb a day. Also, you can connect with nature, and then you can then connect with another human being. Okay, so we all have these people that's like, you just, after you interact with them, you think, golly, I'm just so thankful for that interaction. And oftentimes it's a loved one or someone that's close. And so simply connecting with another human being oftentimes will reassure that brain pattern that it's good. Don't need to fight or flight. You can switch over to that prefrontal cortex. And so the way to remember this one, and going back to the connecting with nature or else the with God, is that when you're in nature, look at the nature and try to find the details that you can admire about them in order to be like, as we talked about last time, whoa, isn't that incredible? It's remarkable. And again, here in Dominican Republic, there's humongous rainforest, tropical plants everywhere, lizards running around. So it's really easy to connect with nature. I'm in nature all the time. Even right now, I have this microphone, not because it's trendy right now, apparently, but because the sounds of the birds or the animals outside and the different things that are happening. We have no windows on the windows. It's all open air, it's screened. And so in all the housing there, it's a pretty remarkable thing to simply wake up to the sound of birds singing and wake up to fresh air. And that's something that you can do in your home also, just as simple as opening up the window to allow fresh air to come and connect with nature. And so again, it doesn't have to be severe. It doesn't have to be drastic. It can just be connecting with the outside by having fresh air or walking barefoot outside for a moment to get grounded, or having plants. And it's just a simple way to connect with nature. And singing worship songs is another good example of connecting with God. And I think it's worth diving into. I've now touched on the fact that I've read a proverb a day, and why a proverb a day. I heard it in a sermon, and the pastor said, hey, it makes it really easy. If you want to do a Bible plan, then if you read a proverb a day, you always know what proverb you're going to read because you know what day it is. So I started that after that sermon, and I haven't stopped, and I've done it every day for the last probably year and a half. And the thing that's interesting, though, and how divinely perfect the proverb a day was in the book of Proverbs. It's oftentimes referred to as the book for the wise, or the book to get wisdom. And the thing for me that just resonates so much is that many of the Proverbs talk about this road leads to life, this road leads to death. And that's really what we're talking about in this whole course series, and using godly and biblical principles to understand that scripture. Because someone is either fully expressive of health and life, and Jesus gave that full example. I mean, he was so impactful for a few short years, and serving and helping other people, and then he was gone. And I believe that's the way we're kind of called to live. And I feel generally that we've accepted that if someone is sick, then it's just bad luck. But that's not really what Jesus talked about. That's not really how Jesus spoke, and that's not how Jesus referred to sickness. He actually rebuked people, saying their faith is what faltered. And this isn't to shame anyone, and this isn't to say, well, clearly they have sinned and that's why they're sick. I would just say that we don't have enough understanding. I don't think that Jesus was wrong, and I don't think that people should feel bad. And that's really where, as a healthcare provider, as a doctor of connection, a doctor of Christian values, a doctor of chiropractic, that I'm striving to fully understand is what this profound wisdom that was passed on for generations within the Bible is saying that we can implement into our daily lives. And I think I'm so far from being the healer that Jesus was. I believe it's my responsibility to actively seek out wisdom, which is the Proverbs. So that's, I'll touch on that over and over again, because again, it says this road at the time. And again, this is how much more I need to study them. I can't even really quote them accurately or with any kind of precision, but there's a proverb that says there's a road that seems right at the time that leads to death. And I believe that's where we're at with our healthcare world that we live in. So again, when you connect back to the Bible and you're looking to rev down that fight or flight response, rev down that amygdala, that warrior part of the brain, you're looking for life and you're looking to connect with life. And it's an instantaneous thing once you get it. And just adding a little bit to your life throughout your life. So anytime you say, well, what the heck? That's the amygdala part of our brain, fight or flight, warrior part of our brain. We need to connect and connect with something that is good, that is from God. And that's where nature is such an easy example. It is from God. And so the third point is cultivate. And I believe that this cultivate can also incorporate the other two, because of course you can cultivate a garden, you can grow a garden. And why does the cultivation activate the prefrontal cortex? Why does the cultivation allow that energy process to be satisfied, that fight or flight response to be satisfied? Is because the amygdala, the fight or flight response is right now. That energy is like, use this right now, and we can't fight people. It's not right. It doesn't solve any problems. So that action of growing something takes action now, but then it also requires future planning. To grow something is to have to watch it, to water it, to monitor it, to fertilize the soil. And so now that engaging part of the brain of like the next steps. And again, this is all skills that have to be developed, and skills are developing for a future outcome. So just by simply taking on a new habit, a new hobby, painting or playing a musical instrument during the thick of the pandemic, I started the process of learning how to play piano, and I would love if someday, if God could just miraculously, because it will take a miracle to get. I'm on the top of a mountain on a road that goes up a mile long, winding, bumpy paths that the motocontros and the taxi drivers don't even like coming up here, and so it's going to take an absolute miracle. But I would love to have a pipe piano up here in the huge open air kitchen area here and community area, and to be able to continue to cultivate that skill, because it's a little tricky to do it without a piano. So cultivating can also be developing a skill, and then something that you're actively working on improving another language. And that's the thing where I was immersed in that in the Dominican Republic, because there is not we are the only other, they're referred to as gringos, white people, in the town of Montiano. I have met a handful of people that speak a little bit of English, but that was really only recently. For the majority of the time that we're here, everyone speaks Spanish and no one speaks English. And even the Dominican language is enough different from traditional Spanish that a lot of the translator apps don't accurately convert the words and the phrases. So it literally, I was forced into the environment where I had to cultivate new skills of new languages, and then also new skills of learning electrical work, because the majority of the wiring is done poorly, plumbing issues, roots growing into toilets and sewer lines. And so I was forced into a cultivation immersion experience. And again, for you, it doesn't, I mean, you could put it into an immersion experience, I guess. You could put yourself into a scenario where you would have to learn new skills in order to adapt. And then that would jumpstart the prefrontal cortex. But again, it just depends on where your life situation is. Simply working on developing a skill set activates that prefrontal cortex. Growing something activates that prefrontal cortex, satisfies that need of energy to be used in action. So don't hate, cultivate.